Good morning and welcome to morning yin yoga. It's just a short yin, an hour long. It doesn't seem that short, does it? It's a little shorter than normal. So in any case, you might want some fluffy things. So I've got blanket, I've got some bolsters. You may not have those at your house, unless you're really into yoga, then you might have purchased yourself a bunch of crazy props. But some throw pillows will do a nice job. So if you have a little bit of both of these, that would be great. If you're inclined towards aromatherapy and you have some aromatherapy that's a little bit relaxing, you can put a drop or two on your yoga mat, and that might give you this kind of relaxing aroma to be around. If aromas are not your thing, then clearly you should not do that. So once you've organized yourself, maybe you have some, if you have some yoga blocks, blocks are great. If you don't have yoga blocks, I think throw pillows work pretty good for most of the purposes. They won't work as well for everything, but you'll make it. So we're gonna start with a seated butterfly today. And a seated butterfly means we're gonna put the feet together and fold forward. And so if you would benefit from some extra height underneath your hips, like I find it really useful, what you can do is take a blanket or a throw pillow, and then when you sit on it, rather than sit where the blanket comes underneath the thighs, you're actually going to put your sit bones right on the edge. So that you sit on the blanket just at the very, very tippy tips of your sit bones. And then it kind of has this effect as you fold forward of lifting the pelvis just a little bit. And for some of us, that'll give us a little less pressure on the knees. If that still doesn't work, you can put a little block or a throw pillow under the edge of your knees to provide a little extra support, okay? And then you fold. And then you can stack up some props so that you can rest your head on something, like that's a possibility. Or you can just let yourself sort of cascade forward. It really depends on how things are going in your neck and your shoulders and your back as to how far forward is going to be good. So just let yourself get a little rounder. Always check in with the pose. So we get into the shape and then you feel. Should I put a little extra support under a knee, or should I bring my feet a little farther out or a little closer in, right? So you're just experimenting a little bit for the first minute or so. And then once you've gotten through that first minute, we're just gonna let everything else relax. And try to stay mostly stable. Like, doesn't mean you can't move at all, but just notice the kind of movement that tends to be fidgety. See if you can mostly stay stable. And I tend to find myself like with a little extra tension around the neck, sometimes especially in the morning. So while you're hanging out here, you can add a little subtle stretch or movement to your neck. If there's tension around your jaw, then you'll find ways to release the jaw. We're going to stay for about another minute. Take a nice big breath. Let go with a big ah. you're going to inhale your way up. And when you get all the way to the top, lean back and let your legs go straight. Oh. Now I'm going to slide off my blanket for a second so I can kind of lean back a little bit more and then give my legs a little shimmy. Prisms in my windows and they're gently moving and there's little rainbows going around I keep seeing out of the corners of my eye. Hopefully you have rainbows at your house too. Whether they're inner rainbows or outer rainbows. All right, so we're gonna take the legs out into a V shape, and it doesn't have to be as far as you can go. It can be a little bit more conservative than that. Practice starts out with a couple of forward bends, and then the vast majority of what else we're going to do will be the opposite of that. Kind of slowly working our way toward back bends. All right, so you're going to pause and fold. Now, as we hold this shape, it's possible that you'll want to kind of lean more to the right for part of it, lean a little more to the left for part of it, and that's legal. You can do that. I have put a blanket underneath my knees to prevent my knees from hyperextending, so you might need the blanket back under your hips, or you might need to have a bigger, like a pillow under each knee to give yourself a little bit more room here. The legs can get in a little closer. That often helps if you have trouble with folding forward, or bending the knees is very helpful. People who can fold their pelvis around their legs so far that they can actually rest their chest and belly on the floor. And so if that is your range of motion, you're certainly welcome to take that range of motion. Just be mindful of overdoing things. What we're aiming for with yin is that we come to the point where you just feel something. So I'm folding forward until I just feel something. Maybe the place I notice first is my inner thigh, or maybe the place I notice first is my low back, or maybe the place I notice first is somewhere else, right? Back of the neck, something. Wherever it is, you fold until you feel that, right? You feel something. And then pause and wait. And sometimes that sensation will shift, and it will either get lighter or it will get more intense. If it gets more intense, you might back away from it a little bit. If it gets lighter, you don't feel it anymore, you might then proceed a little further forward or more to an edge. So we're finding the beginning of sensation, because we're not trying to reduce the nature or change the nature of our connective tissue per se. We're not trying to stretch the tendons that hold the ligament, that hold our muscles to our bones, or the ligaments that hold our bones together. We're just trying to put enough stress on the system to encourage it to hydrate, and to let the fascia, which lives between those tendons and wraps around the muscle and lives right under the skin, to encourage that fascia towards a little bit more movement. If you pull too hard, or you go too far in, and you get more sensation than just that inkling, then the danger is that you're going to actually do damage to those tendons and ligaments. And what happens when we overdo it in that particular area is that they actually become less mobile, and we feel tighter rather than looser. And so the magical part with yin is to get just to the beginning of the sensation. We've got one more minute. So just at the inkling. We're not going for any sort of pushy aggression at all. a nice big breath. But go with an ah, and then inhale your way up. Lean back, bend your knees, and then bring your legs together. Now take a couple moments to move around. We're gonna come into a lunge. And you might want like some padding for your knee if you have a harder surface underneath you, or you might need some extras, like an extra prop, like a block or something. So take a few moments, get those things that you need, have them nearby, and also you might want to do some different shapes with your back. So I'm going to turn sideways for this portion because I think it'll be easier to see what's going on. Because my back has been used to this shape and I'm now going to ask it to do more of this shape, it does help to do a little bit of movement in that direction first. Because it'll feel really weird after 2 forward bends to get the body to be like, yeah, okay, cool, I'll go that direction. Okay, so then you're going to pick a leg and bring that leg forward. Okay, I'm going to want this in a minute. Close by. Okay. So, I've got right foot forward. I've got my left knee on the ground. I'm going to take a moment with this lunge and just try to feel where my edge is. Now there's two edges. There's the edge of this hip socket and there's the edge of this front part of my hip. And then there's other places too, but those are the 2 biggest ones for me. So I'm trying to feel out, like, where's the place where I feel just enough sensation in one of those 2 places, or in both. And then when I find that, I'm gonna stay put. So I'm using this pillow as a prop. You can use anything you've got handy, if you've got a piece of furniture, something like that. Just to give myself a place to kind of rest my arm or my elbow. And I'm holding steady here. Now you can put your hands on the floor. I'm going to do that in a minute. Well, it's going to be a little more than a minute, but about halfway point I'm going to put lower down a little closer to the ground. I find that when I'm upright, I feel this a little differently in this area than when I'm in a lower position. And it's really just a choice. What are you aiming for, or what places feel interesting to breathe into? Lunges are a little bit more, like if there's a spectrum between yang and yin, like to me the poses where you lay on your back are the most yin, most like I'm surrendering to the world. And then poses like this are more towards the yang end of the spectrum. I'm not doing this pose in a yang way, it's not dynamic, but it definitely it's more muscular. I have to use a little bit more of my core to hold myself up. So that's why at this point, we're halfway here. At this point, I like to get a little bit closer to the ground. Now that being said, it is not right for everyone to bring themselves closer to the ground here. And so if it's not right for you, don't do it. For me, there's a little bit less work, but mostly because I prop myself up. And then, but there is like I don't have to hold myself up with my core as much, and so now it's just the stretch on the front of my hip, just this movement in this hip socket. I'm just trying to be careful not to go farther than I should, right? Just to the point of sensation. Now you can add a little bit of a twist, kind of turn towards that open leg. You could, like if your shoulder's inclined, you could wrap that arm behind your back. longer here. Take a really big breath. And then we're going to exhale and gently take ourselves back out of the lunge. Now pause for a moment at the point where you sort of feel a little bit of stretch through your hamstrings here. We're not going to go too sharp into the sit bone, but just enough where you feel that little edge. You might have a knee that's a little bent, like my front leg is a little bit bent still. So I'm not pulling really hard at my sit bone. Transition space between this and the half saddle. Now, what you can do if you've got a pillow or a block is you can sit down on that pillow or on a block so that it's easier for you to put your shin on the floor here, okay? And then you can lean back or build a bigger stack of props. Here I've got some furniture in my way and a plant, but you get the notion. So this, we're looking for a little sensation right here in the top of the thigh, top of the ankle, but not too much. Now, for me, this does work, and it's pretty great. If I want to recline back more, because that is what helps kind of, for me, open the hip and the hip flexor a little bit, and when I'm sitting upright, there's a little bit of sensation, but it's mostly in the ankle, and I want more in this quad and hip flexor area. So what I'm going to do, and this is a little tricky, but I'm going to show you the best I can. Okay. So I'm going to come down to the floor. I'm going to use a blanket under my shin so it's less on my ankle and more in my thigh. This also helps keep my knee a little bit more supported. And then, because my foot doesn't want to come right up against my hip, now if yours does, if your foot comes right up here, you're going to be able to stay more straight on this. Because mine does not come all the way to here, then I move at the diagonal, okay? So I rotate my hip to match my knee and then let myself kind of lean back. So now I'm getting the sensation in the top of my thigh and a little more across the front of the hip. Again, I'm going just to the point where I feel that. Right now, that means I'm propped up on my elbow. If this sensation shifts, and sometimes it does, then I might wind up laying down a little farther back with a pillow under my back always. For you, you might not need the pillow. You might be able to recline straight back onto your back. There are some people for whom this is not a tight area. This area does not get a lot of, it just doesn't feel like you ever have tension there. For me, I'm very loose in the hamstrings comparatively speaking to the top of my thigh. So this is the area that's a little more sensitive for me. So I don't want to go too far because then I'm going to get myself into trouble at the top of my hip or at my knee. I just want to feel this sensation of this area gently being stimulated in some fashion. And you might describe that as a stretch. Sure. You might describe it in other ways. That's sort of what we're after here. It's just the beginning, just the inkling of sensation. Now, if you're really loose and you don't feel anything here in this position, take your other leg, bend it, put the foot on the ground, and that might give you a little more sensation, or you can even bring that knee into your chest. And so that's a way to just change the sensation for you if you are inclined to not have as much sensation in your body here. It's really good. I love this pose. It's very difficult pose for me in many ways because it asks me to pay attention to a body part I most often ignore, which is this area. I tend to stay curled up more than I stay stretched out. So it asks me to do things with this area of my body that are a little bit tricky. Now, we're about halfway. So if you're in the seventh circle of hell, you can roll to your side and hold onto this foot, either with a strap or with your hand, or if you prefer, you can lay on your, instead of laying on your side, it's more like a twist, kind of. It's called the cat pulls its tail. So So to do it, what you would do, I'll show you, this is the leg that I'm gonna keep bent. So all I'm gonna do is get it out of this position, and then I'm gonna take the other leg all the way across, and then I'm gonna hold that foot from here, okay? So that allows you to stretch this area, and you can lower all the way down onto your side. You don't have to hold yourself up on your elbow, but it's a way to get out of this shape. So if that is gonna be better, do it that way. If this way is working out, do it this way. So it's up to you. You want to treat your body well and make sure that what you're doing is not too insane. Okay, so we're getting close to our last minute here. And finally for me, this area has softened up enough that I feel like I can lay backwards and hopefully not run into too many plant interferences. Me being an interference in their life more than them being an interference in mine. They're clearly here looking gorgeous and producing oxygen. What do I have to complain about? Taking nice deep breaths of the oxygen wherever it is around you. Take our last couple of breaths here, about 3 breaths left. I'm going to stretch through this whole side of my body, just those last 3 breaths. Just kind of, giving my upper body a kind of companion stretch to this thing I've been doing with my hip flexor and my quad. All right, so now to get out of this, the way that I do it is I get my thighs very close together and then I roll onto the side so my knee has support, and then I straighten out the leg. Now you can do it other ways. Oh, that feels good. It's so nice. When I come out, this is the thing that tells me whether a pose is good for me or not, okay? When I come out of a yoga pose, if the immediate feeling is, ooh, that's nice, and there's a sense of lightness and ease to the body, I feel pretty good about that. If I come out of a pose and it's like, there's any feeling like I have to tense up to get away from a shape, then I know, okay, that was more than I should have been doing, or I wasn't supported enough. And so those are little lessons I've learned along the way about how poses are meant to be for me, right? We have to find poses for ourselves, but it takes some practice. We're going to have to experiment a little bit before we're going to be totally ready. Now, I'm going to show you the upside down version of what we're going to do, which is the swan pose. So the leg that I had stretched out in, all the way straight, that's going to become the bent leg. And if you want to do this on your back, you don't have to have a pillow under you, but I'm going to leave it here because it's blocking the sun for a second. And then you can bring your other leg up on top, and it can be just that simple. Just rest this leg, put this leg on top. And for a lot of us, there's already going to be a sensation in the hip. You don't need any more sensation. This is going to be good. In fact, it's feeling kind of great, so I might come back to this. But I will show you the other option. So the other option is what is called the swan pose. And so that pose, this leg is the bent leg, and this leg becomes the straight leg. And then I let myself either fold or stay propped up or create a little, pillow fortress to land on. So you can do it either way. And actually, that one's feeling pretty good too. I'm going to go back to the one on my back because I was really digging that. Okay. So I'm going to let myself kind of lean into this pillow so I have a little bit of support here. It also brings me a little closer thigh to chest without a lot of work on my part. So I can relax a little bit more deeply. And then I can see, like, if I shift my knee more to the center, do I like that sensation more? Do I like it more if my ankle is more on the center line? And for me, usually right around the shin, moving toward the knee but not too sharply feels, feels good. And again, once you find your spot, then you can adjust the rest of the body. And we're gonna hold steady for a bit. So that first minute was us kind of finding our place in the pose. And then we're gonna stay for a few more minutes right where we landed. And if it shifts, then you shift. I've noticed a little bit of tightness in my triceps starting like last night before I went to bed. I noticed it, and it's still kind of there. So I'm just gonna use the opportunity to give myself a minute or so of letting my arms relax in this overhead position, see if I can release some of the tension from the back of my arms. Yin yoga focuses on the hips and the legs and the lower back because that's where the really dense layers of tissue are. We have multiple layers of muscle stacked on top of each other or next to each other or overlapping. There's more chance for there to be restriction or inhibition of movement. I'm not sure what the right word is, but just for us to have range of motion issues that are coming from the layers of muscle and tissue. So it tends to be the focus because those deeper layers of tissue sometimes need a longer period of time for us to hang out with them, for them to be completely released. So I don't need as long in my shoulders. Generally, the half the amount of time I would spend on my hips, I could spend in my shoulders or less. But when I first got started here, my fingertips were not close enough to touch the floor, but now they are. So that's probably enough. I'm starting to feel it right at the attachment, on this side anyway, in my armpit. So that says to me that I've stretched out this part here, or released some tension from this part of the muscle and the tissue here. And now I'm getting into attachment point, so it's okay to stop doing that. And again, this is just something that I'm kind of checking into and learning from my own practice. Let's see what happens. Generally for me, I know if I start to feel things at a connection point, at an attachment point, that's a little too sharp. I don't want to feel like my tendon is being ripped away from the bone in any way. A little bit of pressure in the tissue that lives between the attachment points is fine. But right at an attachment point, that is a little trickier. Right on? So hopefully that makes sense to you. And if it doesn't make sense to you now, maybe it will. Okay, you guys, we got about 30 seconds left here. Nutmeg. Nutmeg. Take another deep breath. Let go with a really big. Alright, you guys are going to come out of your pose, and then you're going to jiggle around, and I am going to do a small modification to placement of my router so that my tiny furry creature will stop attempting to chew it up. Oh. Because she loves the rubber feet on the bottoms of things. But as we have already discussed many times, rubber things are not edible. They're not. They're not edible. Oh. All right, yogis, I've got good news for you. We are going to do the other side. How excited are you right now? I feel your excitement over here. So when you're ready, we're going to do the lunge on the opposite side. So since I'm kind of already oriented that direction, I'm actually going to just turn around. So I've got some props here. Okay, so last time I had my right leg forward and my left knee on the ground. So this time I'm going to put my left leg forward and my right knee will be on the ground. And again, I want to start out with a pose and use my first minute to sort of find my home. Like, how far forward should I go? Do I need a little more padding under a knee? And then once you find a spot, we're going to pause with it and breathe. Through, or maybe that was our first minute. I'm pretty sure it was the second one though. So you can, I think it was, it's possible that I'm having a bit of a time where, in any case, if you're up for it and you want to get a little closer to the ground, you can do that. If it was feeling pretty good where you were, stay where you were. Don't forget to take deep breaths, yogis. So we've got about 45 seconds left here. Just breathing deep. All right, yogis, we're gonna take a big breath. And then we're gonna back ourselves up here. All right, so pause. You might sit down on a block. You might come all the way out of here to go into your half saddle. And so I'm gonna kind of halfway this, put my bolster here, land on the bolster. That gives me an opportunity to kind of shift where my knee is in relationship to everything else. And then I'll slide forward off of the bolster. Oh, and use it for my back. Okay. Making arrangements for furniture. And so again, we kind of find our way into this shape. And you pause where you first feel the sensation in the top or the front or wherever. And if you want to do this one for the whole time in that position where you kind of roll around and hold onto your foot, do that. If this is feeling okay for half the time, you can do it half and half. Noticing how things are going here. So we're about halfway through. So this might be the point where you kind of move into a different shape, or if it's feeling like it's more inviting, you can stay here. And then every time you get distracted by hair on your clothes or the antics of your furry coworkers here in your home office, you can just come on back to the breath, yogis. And then notice the pose again. About 45 seconds left here. So we're going to take 2 big breaths. And then when your exhale finds you again, we're going to try to create support. So however you come out, just make sure that your knee has some support so that when you straighten it back out, you're being mindful of that. Oh, and then give it a moment. Notice how everything feels. I love to do little ankle circles too, because the ankle takes a little bit of pressure on that pose. Top to the toes, things like that. All right, so maybe you're staying with this reclining version of the swan, or maybe you're gonna bend this leg that was straight and put yourself into the swan on your belly. So either one of those, whichever one you like better. So my left leg was the straight one, so my left leg is now the bent leg, or the leg that's on top if I'm doing this version, and the leg that's bent and up front if I'm doing the other version, right? So if you're doing it. Let's be clear, it's you. You're the one who's doing it. And again, you might experiment a little bit with the angle of the shin, or you might even, like, you could put a block under your foot, or you could rest your foot up on the couch, or something like that as well. So this is enough for me to feel this kind of inkling of sensation here. So I can pause. And then breathe, nice deep breaths. Try to relax around the eyes and the jaw. let the back of the skull relax a little bit, like these muscles that kind of hang out with the back of the neck. You might have to do like some little movement if you carry a lot of stress in your neck and shoulders. Who doesn't really, but you know. Sometimes when you start to play with tension release, you'll find you yawn a few times. It's another way that our body helps reduce or release some of the tension around the mouth and the neck. Relax around your eyes, like all around the temples. See if you can soften all of the little muscles that live in this area and the ones that come up into the scalp here. Sometimes those can get so tight when we have anxious situations that they hurt. So giving yourself permission to kind of let go of some of that kind of tension while we're holding this kind of shape. Interesting. So we got 1 minute left, yogis. We've got about 3 more big breaths. Nice big inhale. And then with your exhale, you're going to gently release yourself, whether you roll into your hip or you just unwind the legs, and then give yourself a little rinse out. Yogis. So I'm just kind of checking in and noticing sort of everything in my legs and my hips feels a little bit lighter, a little bit, just feels pleasant. And it's possible that you didn't notice before, so there might be no difference, and that's okay too. All right, so we're gonna bring ourselves into a position where we are laying on our back. Now, I'm going to get rid of some of the props I have around me so that I can lie down all the way. I might use these again at the end, so I'm going to keep them handy. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do a twist, and we're going to do it for a while. So that's why you might want to have a couple of props handy just in case. And then also, you might not need them, and so you might use them at the very end. Okay, so laying on your back, I'm going to try to kind of diagonal this so that it's, hopefully you can see all the details, but we're going to pick a direction. So first just kind of windshield back and forth, and then feel it out. Like, should I go to the left or should I go to the right? I'm going to go this way first. And so if your legs stack on top of each other, fine. If they don't stack on top of each other, you could put a pillow or something underneath. Now what I like to do is I like to wrap one leg over the other. And some people can hook their foot behind their calf. I can't, but you might be able to. So, in order to make that a little bit more, because there's like an ankle and a knee and things like that, a little bit more accommodating, or I can create a little bit more accommodation for myself, I should say, probably. In any case, by adding a little pillow in underneath my shin, I give my legs room to do that without hitting the ground in an uncomfortable way. All right, so now I've moved my upper back nice and level on the floor, and I'm going to extend out through the arm that's going the opposite way of the legs, and it could be that I'm even going to turn my head that direction, okay? Depends on how it feels to you. So there might be some sensation across this outer hip, there might be some sensation through the chest, and you're going to just pick one of those, and we're going to let ourselves really sink into this twist and stay a while. So we're going to stay for 2 more minutes. We're about halfway through. And again, noticing your breath, come back to that nice deep breath. One of the things I really love about yin is just this opportunity to get quiet and to sink in and to just breathe. And if you notice that your mind kind of starts to think about stuff or create little lists of things to do and that sort of jazz, just when you catch yourself doing that, just come back to being in the pose, noticing your body, noticing your breath. The mind is, and it has a function, right? So like my biceps function is to do this. It brings my lower arm closer to my upper arm. It lets go to release that, okay? So that's what it does. That's its job. And our brain, its job is to think thoughts, right? That's what it does. But often, if you pay attention, you'll notice that the thoughts are sort of loops of thought. They're sort of the same kinds of thoughts over and over again. So we can get sort of caught up in it, but there's also the opportunity to not be in that loop and to just be present for the experience that you're having, right on? So we're about 30 more seconds here. And just coming home to the body and noticing. You might be, you know, like I'm feeling the warmth from the sun coming in through the window. I'm just noticing kind of the sounds around me and just the sensation in my body. So all of those things are present moment things, right? So we just come home to the present moment from time to time. You don't have to direct your attention in a specific way, but just come back home to the moment that you're in. All right, so we're gonna take a big breath, and then we're gonna really gently unwind the top leg and bring it back, okay? And then we're gonna give this a moment to sort of rinse out. Oh. And for me too, the arm has been in a position where I've been stretching quite nicely, the chest, and so I might need a little bit of movement in the arm and in the chest where that comes together. Now just relax for a moment on your back and notice if the side that was on the top of the twist, right, the hip that was up top, if there's a difference in that leg versus the other. So for me, the leg often feels longer, and even this arm feels not necessarily longer, but just different, a little bit lighter. And my adjectives may not be the adjectives you would use, so you figure out your own adjectives. That's part of the fun. You get to decide how you feel. So we're gonna bring the knees in, give ourselves a little rinse. Now it takes about 30 to 40 seconds for the spine to readjust the fluid in the discs so that everything's kind of back to neutral. So if you still feel a little bit of an inclination in the twist going the other way, wait another couple of breaths before you set yourself up on the other side. Okay. So then I'm gonna bring the knees in. I'm gonna give myself a little massage. I know I'm gonna use this pillow under my shin, so I'm just gonna figure that out. And then I'm gonna weave my top leg over the top of the stack. And once I've got my hips steady, then I'm gonna get my upper body steady, and I'm gonna find that position in my arm that feels the nicest. So it doesn't feel crummy in my shoulder joint. There's a really light sensation of stretch across the chest muscles. And then let yourself sink in and get quiet. This is one of those poses that we do a lot in yoga or something similar to it, but we don't necessarily linger as long as we're lingering today. So sometimes that's the interesting bit. It's just the staying for a while. And I like these kinds of poses where the body is not being really sharply torqued in too many directions. Like put the pillows in. Put in a blanket under your shoulder, or put a blanket under your head, whatever you need to be able to create a more soft place here, because the pose time is pretty magical. The amount of time we stay at this really light level of sensation does its kind of own magic. We don't have to strive too much, which is really the yin aspect, right? So in the Tao, which is a Chinese philosophical system, I suppose, there is this understanding that the creative whatever that is the unknown, there's only really one energy, but it's impossible to articulate. And the known universe, the experienced world, has clearly got some opposites, right? So there's light and dark, hot and cold, male, female, soft, hard. There's lots of duality. And so this is where we get this concept of yin versus the concept of yang. So we've got yin and yang. And the yin aspect is an aspect that's a little bit more releasing, relaxed. It's a little bit soft. It's got power to it, but it's the kind of power that comes over time with a kind of soft approach. So imagine, if you will, the tiny trickle of water that carved the Grand Canyon, right? Grand Canyon is massive and breathtaking. It was carved over time by a little stream of water, right on? And that's what we're looking at, or the tiny stream of water that slowly, slowly, slowly builds a stalactite or a stalagmite, right on? So this is the thing, right? So there's power to the kind of practice that we're doing. It's just not obvious, and it's not active. It's a more passive force. And so we're trying to let gravity and time and a soft approach work its magic. And in this case, we're looking at the kind of tissue in our body that's more resistant to quick movement, right? So our muscle loves movement and repetition. That's how you build muscle. But with the other tissues of the body, the skin, the fascia, the bones, the synovial fluid in the joints themselves, the capsules and other things, all of the parts that kind of connect bones to bones, the parts that connect muscles to bones, the bones themselves. Like, these tissues are resistant to, to some degree, to this kind of movement and repetition approach. So some movement and some gentle pause. Just right at the verge of sensation. And again, we could go overboard with this. We don't want to. We really want to try to embody the yin principle of quiet, gentle power over time. And so we've got about a little over 30 more seconds here. Take a nice deep breath. And we're going to come on back to the center. And then you're going to unwind things. And then we're going to see what happens. You're going to stretch out your legs, stretch out your arms. Does it feel more even? Is there no difference at all? Both of those possibilities exist. So whatever it is what it is. Okay. So we're gonna do a final relaxation, and you can do a final relaxation if you have something nearby, like you have a wall and you can put your legs up the wall, or you can put your legs up over a chair or up over the edge of your couch. If you have something nearby like that and you would like to do that, you can do that as your final relaxation. What I am going to do is just a Shavasana corpse pose, but I'm going to throw a blanket under my legs. So I'm going to put I'm going to put this pillow under my legs. I'm going to put the blanket under my head. If I just had a blanket, I would put a blanket under my legs. Okay, so whatever you got handy is what we're working with here. So sometimes you have to figure this out. Sometimes for me, really close to the hips is better, and sometimes it's better if it's a little bit farther away. Now, one of my favorite things with the neck is to have a blanket and then just make the tiniest little bit of a curl in the blanket, so that it can't be too deep or it causes the neck to do funky things. But if you have just a teeny tiny little circle of support under the neck, sometimes for me that gentle release, it just creates this really lovely sort of release right there at those little bones on the back of the skull. And there are some cranial nerves that come out of the brainstem that kind of work through that area, the back of the neck, that are in some ways kind of responsible for our feelings of wanting to pull away from or isolate from other people, or having anxiety, or some other kinds of things. That there seems to be a kind of relationship to the back of the neck and to this sort of area of the back of the skull. So if we can provide a little comfort and support there, sometimes it lets us shift a little bit more into a softer space, a space that feels a little bit more grounded and supported, and a little less vulnerable, so we can be more open-hearted. We have to, in order to be open-hearted, really open-hearted and generous and trusting of the world, we have to first have that feeling of support and that might be the word. Comfort might be the other word. We need that kind of feeling that we are safe. And that is more a back body experience than a front body. So if we can create a feeling of structure and safety under the back body, often the front body follows. So just check it out in your own experience. Like, don't listen to me. This is my experience. If you don't feel those things, then that's not true for you. And let your body relax completely. Yogis, if you want to stay longer, you're at your house. I'm not going to stop you. But in the event that you're ready to end your practice here and either go into a meditation practice or you can go do other things, you're going to start by wiggling your fingers and toes. And we're going to stretch the fingers and toes away from each other nice and big, and then wiggle them again. And then stretch about and turn that into, if not a yawn, into some ankle circles, some wrist circles. And then you can stretch through the legs and arms. I like to bring my knees right into the chest and give myself a little rock on my back. And then I roll to my side to come up, but if you're a person that likes to rock yourself up, you can do it that way instead. So yogis, thank you for joining me for a little hour-long yin class. I hope you enjoyed it. Take a nice big breath together, big inhale. A big sigh. Enjoy the rest of your day. Namaste.